A quiet night across Brooklyn and Queens. A station canopy glows like a small lighthouse. Inside an office with neat folders, a patient man named Michael Franzese listens more than he speaks, and the roots keep their rhythm because he asks them to. No shouting, no rush, just errands that look like deliveries and choices that help the city sleep. Settle in and adjust your volume. You are also welcome to leave a comment below with your local time and location. Chapter 1. Night Pumps and Quiet Math. The city breathes differently after midnight. Streetlights turn the asphalt into a quiet river, and the gas stations become little islands of glow where numbers on the pumps tick upward with patient certainty. A soft click, a gentle sigh of pressurized fuel, the smell that means morning trucks will roll on time. Somewhere beyond the hum, a siren passes without hurry, like a reminder that even the night has chores. In this hour, math whispers. It speaks in gallons and pennies, in what is owed and what is kept, in the way a ledger can cradle a secret so neatly that no one hears it breathe. There is a man who listens for such whispers. He has a steady smile and an unhurried walk, the kind of calm that makes a diner waitress pour him a little extra coffee without asking why. His name is Michael Franzese. He knows the neighborhoods because the neighborhoods knew him first, when he was younger and still learning who keeps what promises. He understands that a city is a set of rhythms. Trucks pull in, trucks roll out, invoices arrive, checks depart, and in the spaces between everyday steps there are chances to organize the flow. At a certain level, organization is kindness. It keeps things on time. It keeps families fed. That is how the pitch always begins. Note far from where the coast bends along Long Island, the word tax follows every gallon of gasoline like a quiet chaperone. A few cents for the state, a few for the federal government, more for roads, for schools, for the ordinary miracles of upkeep that nobody thanks until a pothole vanishes. The pump does not argue, and the customer does not fight the numbers because it is late and the ride home is not going to drive itself. But the math on the back end, the part that lives on carbon paper and in outboxes, has its own personality. It has temperaments and tells. It can be persuaded to walk a different route. Imagine a circle of paper companies that exist more on letterhead than on brick and mortar. They have names as forgettable as clouds: Atlantic something, Eastern something, Tri-County something. One might buy fuel wholesale and sell to another on paper, the second sells to a third, and so on, like a shell game with deliveries that do happen but taxes that do not settle where they should. By the time the last company in the chain owes the taxman a neat mountain of pennies, that company has dissolved like fog at sunrise. The tax was charged at the pump, yes, but the burden of remitting it was shuffled along a loop that closes quietly in thin air. Michael did not invent the loop. Cities invent their own workarounds and then pretend they showed up as rumors. But he saw what could be done with it. He saw the way partners could be recruited and reconciled, the way a smile and a handshake could set the tone so that the trucks kept rolling without stress. The network would stretch from Brooklyn to Queens to Staten Island by way of the long arc of the Verrazano, out through New Jersey where tankers rested in big shadowed yards, then back in the morning like tides. The beauty of the thing, if beauty is the word you would choose while speaking softly, was that no one had to rush. A driver learns to time his meals with loading schedules. A dealer learns to keep two ledgers. An accountant senses that columns can be placed just so, with numbers that look routine, not too thin and not too generous. Even the state learns to blink at a certain rhythm. Receipts go missing across county lines, and the question becomes not who did it, but how to nudge the stream back into its banks. Meanwhile, the island gas stations are still glowing. The pumps chirp and rest. The coffee burns a little in glass pots. It is a quiet empire built on math so simple and so patient that no one at the counter feels hurried. Light humor is the city defense against insomnia, and even in this scheme it appears. Someone jokes that the only thing moving faster than a New York minute is a tax bill that never finds a mailbox. Another says the trucks have better attendance than half the bankers downtown. They laugh because stress loosens when you pretend the future is a friendly neighbor. And in some ways it is. The rent gets paid. The family eatery off Queens Boulevard upgrades from thin napkins to the thicker kind. A dry cleaner replaces the humming motor that made the whole shop vibrate like a tired saxophone. The arrangement needs people who enjoy being on time. Michael shows up before meetings and leaves without making a show of it. He uses real names when real names are necessary and lets harmless titles do the rest of the work. He prefers diners because diners are truth serum for a city that pretends it never slows down. In a diner you can measure a man by how he orders eggs. In a diner you can flip a napkin and sketch a flow that looks innocent, because it is innocent for everyone except the line where the taxes are supposed to land. The risk is not a villain in a mask. It is a gentle tap on the shoulder. A state investigator who reads too carefully. A clerk who notices that 3 companies share a fax number and a taste for short leases. A delivery log that repeats the same number of gallons so consistently that it feels more like an incantation than an inventory. But risk is also part of the lullaby. It hums a note that keeps the crew focused. Do not make a mess. Do not run red lights. Respect the hours and the weather and the limits of a city that forgives almost anything except being made to look foolish. Take a night drive with Michael in your mind. Start at a station near the Belt Parkway, where the canopy lights buzz like contented insects. The clerk nods behind bulletproof glass that has not seen trouble in years because the regulars are loyal and the coffee is strong. Head east. Feel the lanes widen as Long Island turns its face to the sea. Turn back through Brooklyn, where row houses rest under quiet windows, then across the bridge where the cables lift, a harp big enough to play a hymn. On the far side, New Jersey provides storage and plausible confusion. Back and forth, not fast, never fast, but steady, like the heart of a large animal asleep. In the daylight, the newspapers will someday write about a yuppie done, a phrase invented to make breakfast conversation more lively. The truth at night is less dramatic. It is paper shuffling and gas fumes and ledgers that balance if you hold your head at a certain angle. It is a man who learned to organize people, who prefer to be organized. If he smiles, it is because calm is the currency that spends best after 2 a.m, when the only witnesses are raccoons behind the dumpster and a kid wiping down a pump with a grey rag. He is not alone in this. There are wholesalers with interchangeable names. There are station owners who learned long ago that survival is a team sport. There are truck drivers who can solve a routing problem faster than any software, and there are accountants whose biggest thrill is a column that adds up the same way twice in a row. The circle of trust is drawn with pencil, easy to erase. The lessons of the street are blended with the patience of the suburbs, and in the middle is the math, purring like a well-tuned engine. From time to time, a partner brings a partner, and one more name joins the list on an office door that might not open to the public. The list lengthens, and with it the distance between obligation and payment. That is the way the loop survives. It stretches just enough to avoid tearing. It does not taunt, it does not raise its voice. It simply keeps the pennies walking, one small pair of feet at a time, toward places where they will not be easily counted. The city hums while you sleep. The buses kneel at stops and rise again. The ferries carry their small constellations of passengers. In this ecosystem, gasoline is the blood and accounting is the nervous system. The scheme, if you must call it that, is a way to reroute signals without interrupting the pulse. It keeps everyday life smooth, even while it moves responsibility into a shadow that looks a lot like a filing cabinet that never fully closes. Still, the night is honest. It tells Michael the same thing it tells every person who has ever taken a little more than the rules intended. You can have quiet for a while. You can have order and routine and a calendar that works like a Swiss clock. But time belongs to Noah. Eyes adjust. Patterns are learned. That clerk with the good memory gets a new job at a state office. A trooper on the turnpike notices the same trailers making the same turn-offs on the same days. Questions begin as gentle as the first birds before sunrise. Yet in this chapter of the story, the question remains whispers. The crew is steady, the stations are clean, the money is sorted and tallied in rooms that smell like coffee and toner. Michael looks out a window at an avenue that glows like a runway and thinks about how good it feels when a plan behaves. Somewhere, he tells himself, there is a limit, and he will know it when he sees it. He has not seen it yet, so the city turns toward dawn, and the island stations blink as the automatic timers adjust their lights. A truck pulls in with a yawn and a hiss. The driver rolls his shoulders and checks his watch, even though he knows the schedule by instinct. Another day is about to begin, built on what the quiet hours have organized for it. In the space between the pump numbers and the ledger line, the calm remains. For now, the math smiles. Chapter 2. The Road from Brooklyn. Before numbers began to dance for him, Michael was a boy in a borough that teaches a particular balance of respect and ambition. Brooklyn can be loud, but it can also be tender if you know where to look. Corner stores that run tabs because grandmothers always make good on their word, schoolyards where you learn how to step into a conversation without stepping on any toes, Sunday afternoons when the smell of sauce drifts down whole blocks and you can guess the score of the game by the volume of the cheers. In such a place, a name is both a key and a weight. His father was known. The name Franzese carried a presence that opened doors and closed others. The law of the neighborhood traveled ahead of Michael like a breeze through tall grass. He learned early that a steady face is often safer than a sharp tongue. He learned to listen more than he spoke. He learned that people remember the way you make them feel longer than they remember the exact words you used. These were not rules carved into stone. They were the sort of gentle guidelines a city whispers if you pay attention. School came easily enough. Numbers behaved. History unfurled like a street map. Teachers noticed a calm in him, that unteachable ability to sit still while other kids chased the clock. There was talk of paths that had nothing to do with gas stations or ledgers or the particular etiquette of back rooms. College on Long Island offered classrooms that smelled like chalk and resin, evenings under bright field lights, the ordinary promise of a future built from books and the steady work of showing off. But life does not travel in a straight line from lecture hall to ceremony. There are family obligations, and there are tides in a neighborhood that pull stronger than anyone admits. The idea of earning respect without wearing a suit to an office every day can be tempting when the suit never really fits. Michael felt those currents. He did not need anyone to say what was expected. Roads in New York do not always need signposts. You follow traffic, you read the signals in the faces at the table, you adjust. He learned the manners of the life the way a smart kid learns a new language. Speak softly. Do not repeat what does not belong to you. Pay on time. Keep your friends close and your acquaintances comfortably outside the fence. He saw that power when held too tightly becomes brittle. He saw that kindness, when used skillfully, moves mountains without raising a hand. A smile can do the work of a threat, if everyone understands that the smile belongs to someone who can keep order. Brooklyn made him a good judge of rhythm. He could sense when a room wanted a joke and when it wanted silence. He knew how long to hold eye contact and when to look away. These are small details, but our lives are often decided by small details. There were cousins and neighbors and old-timers who looked at him like a promising investment. Not a torch carrier, not a hothead, but a manager in the making. A person who could take a chaotic supply of intentions and turn it into something like a business. By the time conversations about gasoline began to circle, Michael had already learned how to sit at a table and let others talk themselves into agreeing with him. Gas was country simple. People needed it. Trucks needed it. The city needed it more than it needed nearly anything else. The taxes attached to it were invisible to most drivers, and that made them a tempting target not for drama but for the softest kind of trick. If the state never saw the money, would the driver notice? Would the streets crack? The notion had a dangerous charm. He spent time in places that smelled like coffee and rubber and floor cleaner. Not boardrooms, not exactly, but rooms where deals made more sense than any mission statement. He met men who dressed like they were allergic to attention, and men who wore a little too much aftershave. He learned to sort them by usefulness and by risk, the way a chef sorts ingredients before the flame ever touches the pan. He saw where a quiet system could be built and where it would be destined to leak. Family still mattered. You cannot be from Brooklyn and forget that. There were dinners where the small talk felt like wrapping paper over unsaid truths. There were older relatives who spoke in parables, leaving the young to connect dots they had drawn invisible on the tablecloth. There was pride when Michael handled himself well, and there was caution too, because pride and caution are cousins in this world. His father was both a legend and a lesson. Respect the craft, respect the consequences. There is a certain moment in every life when a person chooses who they will be in public and who they will be in private. For Michael, the public face was calm, organized, almost managerial. The private face could afford to admit that the world runs on compromises and the art is to pick the ones that do the least harm. This is how he justified the next steps. He would build something that kept everything moving. He would make sure no one got hurt, at least not in any way that showed up in a headline. He would be careful. He would be better than the men who mistook fear for respect. On Long Island, office parks sleep at night like wild animals with even breathing. In daylight, they serve insurance firms and logistics companies and law practices where young associates build stamina by proofreading until their eyes ache. At night, a back office with modular furniture can host plans of a different sort. Michael liked these settings because they felt harmless. An office fern softens the edges on any conversation. A whiteboard makes every scheme look like legitimate project management. He studied the tax structure like a patient solving a puzzle. The state takes this, the federal government takes that. Wholesalers shoulder the remittance, retailers collect the price that already includes the tax, and somewhere downstream a specific entity must send the pennies home. If the entities become a parade of temporary faces, the remittance turns into a ghost. It is not a violent trick. It is the quietest of disappearing acts, performed on paper, with invoices that stack neatly and signatures that will not survive a hard knock on the door. It was not only about the money. It was about proving a point to himself and to the room, that he could be more than a famous name from a famous borough, that he could be a builder, that he could run a complex operation without scratching the surface of everyday life. He would be the conductor of a symphony no one in the audience knew they were hearing. Delivery routes would be the strings. Cash pickups would be the brass. Accountants would keep time like percussion. The melody would be steady commerce. Every arranger needs lieutenants. Michael chose men who understood that loud is not the same as strong. He picked people who knew the difference between respect and panic. A driver who arrived early without being asked. A bookkeeper who could find a misprint by touch alone. A station owner who treated his regulars like extended family and his paperwork like a religion. He rewarded good habits. He discouraged improvisation. He set the meeting times as if they were a train schedule. With the team in place, he mapped the flow from the tank farms and terminals in New Jersey, across bridges that had their own kind of gravity, into boroughs where a change in signage could signal new ownership even when nothing had actually changed. He wrote timelines on legal pads. He marked the difference between what went on paper and what went on napkins. He built the loop like a watchmaker, assembling tiny parts that clicked into place with satisfying precision. Listen closely and you can hear the city react when a plan like this begins to hum. A man who had been late every month suddenly pays his rent on time. A cousin opens a small storefront with a neon sign that flickers but refuses to die. A Little League team gets new uniforms courtesy of a donor whose generosity is matched only by his discretion. People assume the economy is smiling on them. They are not wrong. Money is a weather system. When it shifts, everyone feels the breeze. But the weather also brings shadows. In certain offices in Manhattan and Albany, analysts start to notice anomalies. Tax remittances dip even as consumption indicators rise. A pattern emerges so faint that only the careful can see it. That is for later, for other chapters. For now, Michael stands at a window in an office park and watches the red brake lights stream along the expressway like embers. He feels the machine start to move. It is not a roar, it is a purr, and he believes, perhaps with too much faith, that a purr can last forever. There is the matter of conscience. Even in quiet crime, there is a voice that asks whether the money diverted from taxes was meant for potholes that will go unrepaired, for school supplies that will be ordered next month instead of this one. Michael hears it and files it away like a report he will read after lunch. He tells himself that everything balances in the end. The city finds other ways. His operation is a rounding error in a metropolis that loses track of whole budgets. He might even believe that for a while. He measures progress not in money but in smoothness. Fewer phone calls at odd hours, fewer questions from vendors, fewer missed connections at loading bays that used to run on chaos. He takes pride in simple things, in a truck that backs perfectly to a dock, in a clerk who remembers a code by heart, in a ledger line that aligns by instinct. This is the engineer in him, the part that loves neat solutions. The danger is that neatness can seduce. It makes you think the world will stay arranged just because you arranged it once. What remains unspoken at the end of these beginnings is the understand that nothing stays hidden in a city built on eyes. New York may forgive, but it does not forget, and it keeps records in the way a forest keeps rings. Michael is too smart not to know this. He simply believes that he is smarter than the pattern. He intends to leave before the final curtain, to change lanes, to go straight when the rest of the traffic turns. He keeps that plan like a lucky coin in his pocket, a reminder that he can still choose the exit when the sign appears. So the road from Brooklyn leads him through college halls and family dinners and office parks and quiet gas stations at dawn. It leads him into the loop that makes pennies vanish and reappear where they are wanted most. It leads him into leadership, a word that sounds good even when it has shadows attached. He is not the first to make such a trip, and he will not be the last. But he is particular, and in that particularity there is both his advantage and his fate. Chapter 3, Pennies on the Gallon. The first lesson is simple. Taxis ride with fuel like a quiet passenger. Every gallon hums with a small obligation that no one sees at the pump. People pay the price and keep moving because the city runs on trust that someone somewhere will send the pennies where they belong. The system is designed for speed and stability. Most people never think about the journey those pennies take after the nozzle clicks home. Michael thinks about it. He traces the path of a gallon from terminal to truck to station to car. He pictures the paperwork moving in parallel, a stream of invoices and receipts, stamps and signatures, each one a small footstep along a long corridor. If the steps are careful and consistent, the corridor feels like a moving sidewalk. If the steps shift just a little, the corridor loops back on itself, and no one notices until the lights come on. In the early days, the loop is humble. A company appears in a modest suite with beige carpeting and a view of a parking lot. The company exists to buy and sell on paper, to sit between the terminal and the street with a smile and an invoice number. It collects the price that already contains tax, then forwards responsibility to another temporary face with another neat letterhead. That face passes the duty along again. By the time the music stops, the chair that owes the remittance is not in the room. The trick works because it feels boring. There are no sirens and no midnight chases, only office coffee and copy machines and trucks that leave on time. The danger of boredom is that it disarms. People look for excitement when they look for trouble. They miss the trouble that wears a tie and carries a 3-ring binder. Michael cultivates this invisibility. He asks for clean desks and dull decor. He favors offices where the loudest sound is a stapler. There are partners to keep content. Station owners appreciate a steady supply and a friendly schedule for payment. Truckers appreciate routes that respect their lives. Accountants appreciate clear instructions and clean math. Michael delivers all three. He creates a culture where everyone believes they are part of something sensible. He treats the loop like a small-town library. Whisper, return what you borrow, and never dog-ear the pages. He meets a wholesaler in a diner off the expressway. Again a diner, because diners make everything sound practical. Over eggs and toast they discuss volumes and timing, never saying more than they need. They talk about weather and bridge traffic, which is to say they talk about risk without breaking a sweat. A deal is a living thing. The fewest words keep it breathing. Supply flows from terminals in New Jersey. The tank farms rise like sleeping whales behind chain link and floodlights. The night crews know the rhythm of loading racks better than the notes of any song on the radio. Michael respects them because they move the substance that carries his math. He ensures the paperwork arrives before the trucks do. He ensures the phone lines are never busy when a driver needs confirmation. The grace of the operation is courtesy. On paper, the chain lengthens. Atlantic this buys from Eastern that. Tri-County that sells to Metro something. A shell on top of a shell. None of these entities lasts long enough to develop a holiday parted. They exist to catch responsibility and throw it forward like a hot potato. The last company, the one that would owe the tax, dissolves into a shrug before any letter from the state has time to clear the mailroom. Station owners shrug too, but for different reasons. The fuel arrives, the price is right, customers come. A tire gets plugged for free because the owner is in a generous mood. A kid behind the counter learns the art of counting change without looking down. Life continues. The loop keeps its promise because the loop depends on everyday normalcy. If anything feels off, it is only that deliveries seem earlier and books seem tidier. Noah complains about punctuality and neat ledgers. The dollars begin to add up, or rather, the dollars that do not leave begin to line up in quiet stacks. A manager buys new chairs that do not squeak. A driver finally replaces boots that were storm away from surrender. A station owner fixes the neon flicker. This is the soft charity of the loop, the way it warms corners without drawing a spotlight. Michael notices how kindness cements loyalty. He encourages small improvements because they make people feel invested. Light humor keeps the air loose. Someone says the state must be on a diet because it is missing so many pennies. Another replies that the state will make up for it with parking tickets. Laughter, then a quick return to work. Jokes are a pressure valve. They release steam without rattling the pipes. The math stays elegant. A volume here, a fraction there, nothing gaudy. Michael warns against greed. He repeats himself on this point because repetition keeps people safe. Do not take so much that the pattern glows. Keep the curve smooth. If a spike appears, shave it back to average. He says this the way a piano teacher says keep your wrists soft. Practice until it becomes natural. He knows the loop will invite attention if it becomes a parade, so he staggers activity, adjusts names, rotates addresses. He practices the art of forgettable detail, a lease term that ends just before a routine audit, a company name that looks like a cousin of another company from 5 years ago, phone numbers that share an exchange but not the last 4 digits. These are stitches no one sees unless they pull the fabric taut. There is also diplomacy. Other crews circle the same pool. Some come wanting a piece, some come to test the fence. Michael prefers merger to conflict. He spreads the work so that everyone eats, and Noah throws a stone at the window. This is less romantic than legends would have it, but more effective. He saves sharp options for emergencies, and relies on negotiation for everything else. At night, he allows himself a walk through a sleepy station. He stands beneath the canopy and listens to the click of a cooling pump. The numbers on the display blink like tiny lighthouses. He thinks of the cities within the city, the one of trucks and tanks and hoses, the one of ledgers and filings and thin paper that smells faintly of ink. He is proud of the order. He believes order is a kind of mercy. Discipline is not immunity. Somewhere an analyst at a state office redraws a graph. Somewhere a clerk compares a set of invoices and hears a faint echo in the numbers. Somewhere, a new hire asks a simple question that senior staff forgot to ask years ago. The loop continues, yet the first soft footprints of curiosity appear at its edges. Michael sleeps well anyway. He trusts his pacing. He trusts the decency he has woven into the schedule. He trusts the fact that most human beings will not sprint toward a problem if it looks like work. The comfort of this belief is both a pillow and a blindfold. For now he does not mind the blindfold. The night belongs to those who can make complexity sing lullabies. The city teaches patience in small lessons. A tanker idles while a gull inspects the mirror. A manager signs a page and straightens the stack as if tidiness could bless the day. Michael watches these moments with the attention of a watchmaker. If the second hand stutters, he wants to know why. If a driver smiles too wide, he wonders what luck arrived and whether it came with a string. This is not suspicion for its own sake, it is stewardship. Keep every cog oiled, keep every hinge quiet, and the door opens for everyone who needs to pass. In a mid-morning drizzle, he stands near a loading rack while vapor drifts like breath on a cold day. The metal arms move with practiced grace. A clipboard changes hands. The radio murmurs a station that plays songs from 10 summers ago. Nothing dramatic, that is the point. The loop survives because it can hide inside a picture of normal life. Trucks in, trucks out, receipts filed, voices kept low, no one in a hurry, no one asleep. The paper companies are not villains in a play, they are paper boats on a controlled stream. Each is folded with care, launched with a little push, and expected to dissolve before it snags a reed. A name appears on letterhead with an address that looks like every other suite in a hallway, that smells like toner and fresh carpet. Phones ring, faxes arrive, a secretary offers coffee, then the boat rounds a bend and is gone, and a new one bobs into view with a name so bland it could sell staplers. Station owners join the rhythm because rhythm is comfort. A man who once chased deliveries now watches them arrive 5 minutes early. He learns to breathe again. He fixes a flickering bulb he had ignored for a year. He buys thicker napkins because regulars notice details. He tells his clerk to keep the bathroom spotless, a promise that earns more repeat business than any coupon. The better things feel, the less anyone asks where the pennies nap before they should be waking on a state ledger. Michael avoids greed the way a pedestrian avoids a puddle that hides a deep pothole. He says take less than you can, and make it look like you could not take more even if you wanted to. He says smooth the line until it feels like a lullaby. The men around him nod because they like sleep more than they like noise. The loop is a chorus sung under the breath. Harmony, not volume. A supplier in New Jersey prides himself on courtesy. He keeps his office cool even in winter so the coffee always tastes better. He says good morning like a habit that kept him safe through rough years. Michael respects him for showing up neat and leaving neat. They speak in specifics. Volumes, windows, turnpike delays, bridge wind. They never say more than needed. The agreement between them is like a handshake inside another handshake. There is a young dispatcher who treats routes like chess. He can picture 2 hours from now as if it had already happened. He moves drops forward when the sky darkens over the river. He steals a half hour from a slow bay and gifts it to a station near a school where traffic swells at dismissal. He does it all with a pencil and a quiet hum. Michael notices and places a steady hand on the boy's shoulder. Talent, he says without saying it, should be taught restraint before it learns applause. On the island, an office park glows in the late afternoon. Inside, a whiteboard carries a curve that would make any auditor yawn. A gentle hill up, a gentle hill down, no spikes, no cliffs. The accountant smiles because the graph looks like sleep. Michael smiles because the graph looks like survival. They agree to change nothing, which is the rarest decision in a city that worships momentum. At a small station off a service road, a cat performs the duties of a night guard. It surveys the counter with an expression that suggests it has seen more than most detectives and prefers not to be impressed. The clerk scratches its head, checks the till, and watches the canopy lights flicker against a low cloud ceiling. A tanker whispers in, patient as a librarian. The hose connects with a polite clank. The world tilts a degree toward order. Still, Michael leaves room for the weather in human hearts. A partner might get restless. A driver might start to believe he is the pilot rather than the crew. An owner might brag on table too far into a night. So Michael rotates jobs the way a gardener rotates beds. He moves people before they learn the wrong lesson too well. He offers rest before fatigue grows teeth. He brings donuts before worry grows a story. Small care is cheaper than large repair. At dusk he drives the belt and watches tail lights rise and fall like fireflies trained by a metronome. He thinks about the first day he noticed the gap in the tax corridor and felt the strange mix of admiration and temptation. Clever systems invite clever mischief. The question is not whether a door exists. The question is whether walking through it makes the house better or worse. He tells himself he has pulled rugs straight and set tables level. He knows that the bill for borrowed efficiency will arrive with a date stamp. He chooses not to read it yet. For tonight, the empire is a handful of neat habits. A promise kept to a driver with a sore back. A call returned to a supplier who hates waiting. A ledger checked until the numbers rest like birds on a wire, evenly spaced and untroubled by wind. The loop does not brag, it does not cough, it does not even smile. It breathes, and the city breathes with it, unaware and grateful. Chapter 4. Paper Trails That Go in Circles. Morning filings begin with coffee and quiet. An assistant unlocks a door on a short hallway where every suite has the exact same carpet and the same framed photo of a sailboat. Inside, a desk waits for a stack of forms, incorporation papers, tax registrations, bank resolutions, everything you need to conjure a company that looks normal at first glance. The office smells like toner and new cardboard. It is the scent of legitimacy. The new company is born with a neat name and a modest purpose. It will buy fuel from a wholesaler and sell it to another wholesaler. It will operate with the speed of a mayfly, long enough to issue invoices and short enough to vanish before anyone comes around with question. No one throws a party for it. No one remembers its birthday. That is the point. Next door, a leasing agent flips through a folder of short-term rentals. He knows without knowing that some of these tenants will be ghosts by the time the lease expires. He also knows the rent will clear every month, because ghosts take pride in punctuality. The agent likes punctuality. He does not ask about business models. He asks about references and points at the signature line. Phones are set up. A receptionist with a pleasant voice answers with grace and transfers with care. The number will match the letterhead and the filings, and when the number is retired, it will be retired with gratitude and no drama. A fax line exists to finish the camouflage. In this era, a fax line is a small pledge of seriousness. The machine itself is a humming grey animal in the corner, eating paper and exhaling confirmations like little sighs of relief. Bank accounts open with small deposits. The banker appreciates a tidy story and a clean shirt. The story is always tidy. Distribution, logistics, wholesale. The banker hears these words as if they were lullabies. The signatures are smooth, the accounts will be used as bridges, not destinations. The money will pass through like a commuter who never misses a train. Contracts are drafted, terms are reasonable and fair, another layer of perfume that smells like compliance. Payment windows are neither tight nor loose. Delivery obligations are stated in sturdy language. If you read too quickly, you would think you were looking at any decent business relationship. If you read carefully, you would notice that the heart of the contract is motion. These companies live to keep the ball in the air. No one wants to be the one holding it at the horn. Meanwhile, trucks do real work. They rumble across bridges, down turnpikes, into boroughs where sunrise paints brick a soft peach. Drivers sign bills of lading with hands that know exhaustion and contentment in equal parts. A dispatcher keeps time like a drummer, making small adjustments when traffic hiccups or when a station manager needs a favor. The physical world remains honest. Fuel is heavy, hoses are stubborn, gravity never forgets its job. The paper world is more flexible. Invoices can travel faster than trucks. Payments can be scheduled to a rhythm that benefits everyone except the state ledger. The loop depends on this difference between weight and weightlessness. Michael understands both. He keeps his feet in the truck yard and his head in the filing cabinet. He respects the men who lift and the clerks who type, because both are engines in the same machine. In a small conference room with frosted glass, Michael meets with accountants who speak softly and avoid adjectives. They present ledgers with columns that read like poems about regularity. Debits walk beside credits like old friends. The story they tell is that nothing unusual has occurred. The story is believable because it is true in the way a partial truth can be. Fuel was bought, fuel was sold. Everyone was pleasant. The question of tax remittance is left to last, and last is where the paper trail curls out of sight. He reviews the shell companies as if he were inspecting a line of parade floats. Each has colour and a hint of personality. None has enough substance to carry weight. He times their exits with care. No entity stays long enough to grow roots. He files dissolutions with the same courtesy he used to file incorporations. The circle closes. The names become yesterday. A week later, new names join the line. At a station in Queens, a young attendant watches a tanker pull away and wonders where all that fuel was yesterday. The answer is everywhere and nowhere. The loop keeps the city supplied. The loop does not keep record where anyone can read them without squinting. This is by design. Paperwork moves like a magician's hand. Look here, look that. Blink and the card is gone. Michael keeps schedules in pencils and pens. Pencil for plans that breathe, pen for orders that must hold. He writes addresses and contact names on index cards and locks them in a drawer. He tells each office manager to maintain a clean desk rule. A clean desk is not only tidy, it is strategic. A blank surface minimizes stories when someone from the outside walks in without calling first. He trains his lieutenants to answer questions with hospitality, offer coffee, ask about their drive, make eye contact without trying to hold it hostage. The best defense against suspicion is ordinary kindness. People want to leave an office feeling that they met decent folks who love clean paperwork and fresh donuts. If they leave smiling, the filing cabinet breathes easier. Even with all this grace, hints accumulate. A supplier notices that a buyer changes names too often. A clerk at a state office maps remittances over time and sees a dip where a rise should be. An investigator in a suit that fits too well starts showing up at stations just to chat with managers about deliveries. None of this amounts to thunder. It is a change in barometric pressure. People who can feel weather shifts start to pay attention. Michael does not panic. Panic is noise, and noise is a match dropped in dry grass. He responds by smoothing edges. He slows the loop for a week to let the air settle. He merges two paper entities so the graph looks less jagged. He pulls impatient partner off the field and gives him a vacation, masked as a promotion. He does what good managers do when the audience leans forward. He changes the tempo. At home, he lives quietly. A calm kitchen. Mornings that begin with a newspaper and a simple breakfast. He tells himself that a man is allowed to want serenity. He tells himself that his operation is an administrative correction, not an attack on the social contract. He believes this because belief is a tool. Tools keep hands busy and minds steady. In the mirror, he sees a man who has turned chaos into routine. He also sees, if only for a second, the outline of a future where a judge says his name out loud in a room with hard benches. He blinks and the outline fades. He is not there yet. He has chapters still to write, deliveries still to coordinate, employees still to protect. He decides to keep his head down and his math exact. A late evening brings him back to a truck yard in New Jersey. Floodlights cast long shadows. Diesel engines tick as they cool. The smell of fuel and metal and rain on dust wraps around him like an old coat. He walks past hoses coiled like sleeping snakes and pats the side of a tanker as if it were a horse. He thanks the crew, not in words but in the way he shows up and pays on time. Respect looks like a signed check that does not bounce. On the ride back across the bridge, the skyline glows like a promise. He thinks about the circle of paper he has drawn around a very physical business. The circle shields, but it also confines. Circles are easy to inhabit and hard to leave. He wonders, just for a heartbeat, whether he has built a cage with nice furniture. Then the toll booth arrives, and the thought dissolves in the rhythm of change and receipt and the rolling forward into the night. Back in an office, a printer sings. Pages stack, warm and convincing. The trail goes in circles because circles are neat. Circles imply closure, but in the margins of those pages the first faint pencil marks of scrutiny appear. A name underlined, a date questioned, a volume that asks politely to be double-checked. The circle does not break. It quivers. The city does not notice yet. Michael does. And he tightens his tie, straightens the files, and prepares for the next movement of this calm, intricate song. Chapter 5: The Yuppie Don and the Weekly Count. A city can be measured by its calendars, movie premieres and school recitals, and the quiet march of rent day. In Michael's world, the most important square on the week is the day of the count. Not an event with banners or speeches, just a ritual that keeps the gears from grinding. It happens in a room that smells like toner and fresh coffee, at a table that has seen pens run dry and half a dozen nervous jokes. The count is where numbers turn into stories and stories turn into decisions. He arrives early because early is a signal. It says we respect the rhythm. It says we trust the math to speak. The lieutenants trickle in with folders tucked under coats. The accountant places a small stack of ledgers like a priest laying out hymnals. No one raises a voice. The opera of humility begins. Michael asks simple questions. Are the deliveries matched to the invoices? Are the invoices matched to the bank lines? Are the bank lines matched to the next shell in the parade? Everyone nods. Everyone breathes. Outside, Long Island office parks do their slow dance of minivans and lunch trucks. Inside, the week is stitched together with tidy language. A station on Queens Boulevard synced right on schedule. A tanker that needed a tire but still made the second drop. A clerk who caught a transposed number before it turned into a headache. Little victories, the kind that make an operation feel blessed. Michael praises them in short sentences. He has learned that few words travel farther. The nickname arrives the way such things always do, on the back of a headlines. A writer in town decides the story needs a suit and a hair gel reference, and Yuppie Don is born. The phrase sticks to Michael's jacket like lint. He does not chase it away, he does not invite it in, he simply keeps walking. In private, he makes a small joke about how it is nice when the city thinks you have time to shop for cufflinks. Then he goes back to counting gallons and smoothing schedules, and reminding everyone to breathe. There is an art to selecting offices that keep tempers cool. Michael favors rooms filled with soft light, innocuous art, indoor plants that refuse to die. He appreciates the way a fish tank can relax a room, the way a gentle hum from the air conditioning can erase awkward silence. In these surroundings, tense meetings simply do not take root. Disagreements glide into compromise. Numbers, like koi, circle in calm water and return to the starting point without complaint. He keeps the roots humane. Truckers are not soldiers, they are professionals with families and backs that remember every winter. Michael listens to their small requests. Start me earlier on Tuesdays so I can make my daughter's game. Give me the bridge at dawn and I will handle the heavy load. Bring me to Staten Island on Thursdays because the coffee at that bay tastes like home. These details sound like noise to outsiders. To Michael, they are the tempo that lets the whole song play without a sour note. Cash flow has a personality. It does not like to sprint and stop. It prefers a jog. So the weekly count becomes a metronome, outlays to drivers and station owners, settlements from retailers who appreciate the calm, transfers between companies that are already halfway out the door. He keeps the pulse even. If a week runs hot, he cools it with a pause on a purchase and 2 softer invoices. If a week runs thin, he tightens roots and asks for a favor from a friend who owes him one. He coaches his lieutenants like a patient teacher. No spikes, he says. Smooth the line. If the graph is a gentle hill, the auditors nap. If it looks like the skyline, the auditors wake. The men smile because they see the truth in it. The softest hand leaves the fewest fingerprints. In this world, restraint is not just virtue, it is camouflage. Light humor oils the hinges of the meeting. Someone says a station in Brooklyn has a cat that judges customers from the counter and only purrs for regulars. Someone else says the cat knows who tips. Laughter ripples and then fades into the rust of a paper. The mood matters because fear corrodes. Michael knows he must feed the crew serenity. He does it with timely payments, with courteous reminders, and with the confidence that every problem has a calm solution if you give it 10 minutes in clean paper. The larger network requires diplomacy. Crews from other corners of the city knock at the edges. Some arrive with charm, some bring a chip on the shoulder. Michael prefers a wide table to a narrow fence. He slices the pie so that everyone eats. He sets expectations in the language of schedules rather than threats. He says, here is the lane, here are the mile markers, here is when the lane merges back into traffic. People relax when they can see the roads. Respect travels ahead of him like a quiet escort. Note the kind that demands silence, but the kind that encourages it. He pays on time. He avoids humiliating anyone. If someone fails, he moves them sideways before moving them out. He believes that a man who leaves with his pride intact will not go out of his way to cause trouble later. He is right more often than not. But the week is not only about money. It is about scanning the horizon for weather. Reports from state offices drift in through back channels. A new task force with a name that sounds clever. A rumor that a wholesaler in New Jersey has been visited by polite men who ask precise questions. An accountant notices that one of the temporary companies got mail from a department that usually forgets where it put its stamp pad. The signs are still faint. They are enough to get his attention. He responds with grace, not panic. A company slated to dissolve is dissolved a week early. A phone number that could attract curiosity becomes a voicemail that thanks callers and points them to a website that will soon be offline. Records that are no longer needed take a quiet trip to an industrial shredder that sings like a heavy metal bird. Nothing dramatic, nothing rushed, just housekeeping. He takes long walks to think, the way some men pace before a game. Through neighborhoods that taught him manners, past storefronts that survived better days and worse nights, he reminds himself what the city needs from him, which is to keep it moving. He also reminds himself what he owes, which is to know when to slow or stop before momentum becomes a war. He promises himself that he will see the exit ramp when it appears. He hopes he will have the courage to take it. At home, the news talks about lifestyle and labels. The city loves to dress a story in clothes that fit a cocktail party. Michael turns the volume down and listens to the weather instead. He cares about storms, about temperatures that make bridges slick, about fog over the turnpike. He smiles at the nickname that follows him from page to page, then folds the paper and washes the dishes. Quiet routines are a shelter no headline can breach. The weekly count ends the same way it begins. Coffee cups empty, papers stack in neat piles. The accountant notes the next appointment and the lieutenants check their watches. Michael thanks them with a nod and a line or two. Keep it smooth, keep it light, keep it kind. They drift back to their routes and offices, and the operation exhales. The city keeps humming. The trucks keep rolling. The fish in the office tank go on circling, golden and calm, as if they were the guardians of a secret that is mostly about patience. Chapter 6. Heat without flames. Heat arrives first as a feeling you cannot name, a change in the air of quiet rooms, an extra beat between a question and the answer. In Michael's world, heat is not sirens and flashing lights. It is the sound of shoes in a hallway that never had echoes before. It is the visit of a courteous official who asks for a document that should be easy to find and somehow is not. It is a rumor with a badge. In Albany and in Manhattan, task forces gain acronyms and conference rooms gain whiteboards. Analysts draw lines between companies with names that look like cousins. They know the gasoline universe holds rivers of tax pennies. They know some of those rivers evaporate in the sun of paperwork and disappear before the state can drink. They begin to map where the fog forms. The map is faint. It is enough. An investigator stops by a station in Queens and talks to the manager about deliveries. He compliments the cleanliness of the bathrooms. He asks which days are busiest, which routes are smoothest, which drivers tell the best jokes. He writes nothing down at first. He files it away behind a pleasant smile. He returns the next week as if he liked the coffee. The manager begins to sense that this is not about coffee. A clerk in a state office goes home proud because a graph finally behaved. She has been refining it for months, aligning consumption estimates with remittance schedules, learning the seasonal dance of gallons. Now the graph shows a dip that refuses to be weather. She emails her supervisor, who replies with careful interest. The clerk does not know Michael's name. Her curiosity is a pebble that will roll, then slide, then push a little avalanche down a quiet hill. Michael feels the barometer fall. He senses it in small ways. A wholesaler asks for a meeting in person rather than over the phone. A bank manager in a tie too bright suggests a slight change in how wires are described. A long, comfortable supplier stops smiling with his eyes. None of these signal panic. Together they compose a new melody, something a little off-key, something that wants resolution. He gathers his lieutenants and explains the rule of storms. When the sky darkens, you do not argue with the sky. You cover what you can. You slow down what does not need speed. You keep the crew busy with checklists that matter even if they feel small. They nod. They trust him. He sends 2 on paid vacation with the story that their talents are needed for a special project out of state. He retires a paper company early. He audits ledgers as if the ledger were a guest house. He wants to pass the white glove test. Investigations move like chess pieces. A subpoena worded kindly and delivered politely. A request for interviews framed as an opportunity to clarify. Michael hires attorneys who speak in the register of patients. They request time and promise cooperation. They gather documents with the same care he uses to route trucks. This is a new supply chain, moving paper to rooms where questions are asked with soft voices and hard attention. The crew feels the heater's delay. Drivers sit a few minutes longer before rolling. Station owners lean on counters and watch the door. Accountants stay later and proof numbers twice. The operation does not stop. It breathes slower. Michael understands that speed is a tell. He removes it from the equation. He chooses calm as his only tool. There is a man from the inside who decides to talk. Not out of hatred, out of exhaustion. He misses sleeping without rehearsing conversations in his head. He misses being a face at the back of the room rather than a name on a memo. He brings anecdotes and routines and little errors that looked like nothing until he lined them up for the visitor who brought him coffee and a promise of fresh air. He is not evil and he is not brave. He is human, and humans seek lighter loads. Michael hears this through the grapevine that never fails. He sits by a window and feels the architecture of the loop the way a sailor feels the hull in a cross-current. He thinks about mercy, not as a grand act, but as a series of choices. Let this person go with dignity. Absorb that loss without assigning shame. Remove this piece without breaking the whole clock. He edits, he trims, he prays to the God of small mercies who governs paperwork and timing. Courtrooms become a possibility rather than a rumor. He prepares for that possibility the way he prepares for every meeting, by understanding who needs what to leave the room with their shoulders relaxed. Prosecutors need a story that reads cleanly to a jury. Investigators need to feel the puzzle snapped into place. Judges need order. He thinks about how to offer those things without giving away more than the truth already commands. He is not planning a fight. He is planning a landing. Meanwhile, at dawn, the trucks still breathe diesel and fog. A driver checks his mirrors and taps the wheel like a drummer in a slow song. He does his job because the city still needs fuel. The loop may narrow, but the streets must wake. Michael loves this continuity. It reminds him that the work has always been about motion, not spectacle. He allows himself a smile and then it fades, because grace has a schedule, and grace is not infinite. He meets with counsel in a room with carpets so soft the chairs seem to float. They speak in paragraphs that include phrases like best possible outcome and structured resolution. The lawyers respect his intelligence. He respects their fluency in a system that wears suits and carries calendars stamped with decisive days. He asks them to aim for peace, to protect his people where they can, to keep the circle of consequence as small as the law allows. Investigators are not villains in this telling. They are people with jobs and families and the same desire to sleep through the night. Michael knows this and refuses to demonize them. He speaks of them as forces in weather. You do not bargain with a winter storm, You build a path and keep the shovels close to the door. He can live with that. It is cleaner than enmity, and it keeps the story from curdling. The routine at home grows even simpler. Breakfast at a quiet table, a page or two of the paper, a call to check on a station owner whose mother is in the hospital. These small acts are ballast. They keep him upright when headlines mutter. He tells himself that the measure of a man is how softly he moves in hard times. He tries to move softly. A late night brings rain, then a hush. He drives past the river and watches the city glow through mist, each light a little star with its own gravity. He thinks of the pennies that never reached the ledgers where the state keeps its promises. He thinks of the small good those pennies did in the lives they touched along the way. He knows neither thought cancels the other. He accepts that paradox as the tax he owes to conscience. The next morning the phone rings. An attorney with careful diction tells him a date and a place and what to bring. He thanks the voice and writes the information down in steady script, the same hand that once drew the first loops and roots. He breathes. He straightens his tie. He picks up a folder that contains a life translated into pages. Heat without flames, he thinks. The kind that makes you choose, not the kind that makes you run. Heat becomes a syllabus. First come the polite questions, then come the repeat visits, then comes the request for things that take time to fetch. Each step is a lesson in patience for everyone involved. Agents learn to keep their voices warm, clerks learn to double knot evidence envelopes, lawyers learn to translate worry into checklists. Michael learns how to hold still while the room takes his pulse. A midweek morning brings him to a law office with carpets so thick the chairs glide like skaters. The partner assigned to him has the manner of a careful tailor. He measures risk without making a face. He lists options like a waiter offering specials without pushing the fish. Cooperation, he says, is sometimes the best thread in a torn suit. Michael nods. He has always favoured repair over spectacle. The task force expands. More chairs at the table, more binders with tabs in calm colours. A new analyst presents a timeline where dots have learned to connect themselves. Not with fireworks, with the patience of moss finding stone. When she points to a season where remittances drooped while consumption swelled, the room tilts an inch towards certainty. The case begins to have a spine. Michael hears about this second-hand and does not roll his eyes. Competence deserves respect even when it is inconvenient. He spends a day on the road, visiting stations that have learned his rhythm. He tells owners to keep their heads down and their bathrooms immaculate. He tells drivers to obey every limit as if the signs were signed by their grandmothers. He tells accountants to pretend that an order to watch is each column with a magnifying glass and a cup of tea. He becomes a metronome in a room where anxiety wants to freestyle. A friend from long ago asks if there is a quicker way through this storm. Michael answers with a single word: no. The world loves shortcuts until the bill arrives. The only honest road now is the slow one with mile markers that say you are still on course even if your feet ache. He hangs up and walks the block, counting breaths and street trees and reasons to keep kindness in his pocket. The first formal papers arrive with a knock that is more courteous than any movie would admit. "Sign here to acknowledge," the visitor says, "and thank you for your time." The signature is neat. The copy is neat. The hallway is neat. Michael closes the door and places the envelope on a table as if it were a guest who needs a chair. The house feels the change and settles into a new silence. That night he imagines the loop as a set of music stands in a rehearsal space. Some hold pages with notes. Some hold blank sheets where improvisers once believed they were composers. He sees that his own baton has been conducting a song that never asked permission to borrow the hall. He does not hate the music. He does not love it either. He sees it clearly for the first time without the romance that used to soften its edges. Next morning he dictates lists, one for council, one for lieutenants, one for himself. Gather receipts that show ordinary care. Confirm every wage paid on time. Archive what is lawful to archive, and present what is required to present. For himself he writes a line that does not need ink to be permanent. Speak low. Keep promises. Do not confuse calm with immunity. A lieutenant calls to say an investigator has the gift of easy conversation. The man asked about weather on the bridge, about coffee at a certain diner, about a cat that rules a station counter like a throne. The questions seemed friendly until the pattern of them curled into purpose. Michael thanks the lieutenant for the read. He says, "Be friendly back. Civility is not surrender, it is shelter." Visits to offices become scenes from a play about courtesy. People stand for each other. Doors open quietly, water is offered, files are reviewed, dates are confirmed. Someone laughs at a line that is not really a joke. Everyone pretends they're at the dentist and the cleaning will be thorough but painless. Michael reminds himself that endurance is simply politeness practiced for a long time. A weekend arrives and he walks the long way to nowhere in particular. Kids clatter along a playground. A man waters a rectangle of grass as if it were a rare plant in a museum. A dog sleeps under a bench like a folded blanket that dreams of running. The city appears unchanged. The change is inside him, a recalibration of how loud he wants his life to be. He thinks about whispers that became routines, and routines that became walls. He decides to leave a door unlocked in his own mind for whatever comes next. By late afternoon, a drizzle. He drives along the river and watches the tank farms soften into silhouettes. The cranes look like quiet birds cooling their wings. He remembers the first time he stood here and thought this landscape could be turned into a calendar that fed families. He was not wrong about the potential. He was wrong about the cost. He says this out loud to Noah and lets the rain carry it away. On Monday, the lawyers call with a schedule that will turn his days into measured steps. Appear here, produce that, review these, discuss outcomes that allow for dignity and restitution. He agrees without performance. He will try to make it easier for everyone to do their work. He hopes the favor is returned in careful ways. At night he writes a letter he will never send. It begins with a simple admission. I built a beautiful clock and powered it with borrowed time. It ends with a promise to trade cleverness for clarity. He folds the page and slides it into a drawer behind a notebook filled with roots that will never be used again. The drawer closes with a soft click that sounds like the first small note of a gentler song. Chapter 7. Courtrooms and Recalculations. A courthouse in the morning is a machine that runs on punctuality and coffee. The hallways echo with careful footsteps. The benches hold people who are learning to breathe inside a clock that is not theirs. Michael enters with the steady composure of a man who has rehearsed his role. He knows that in this space, etiquette carries more weight than reputation. He nods to the officer at the door. He thanks a clerk for a folder. He takes a seat where the light falls clean and even across the floor. The language of the law is a different dialect of the same city. It speaks in counts and findings, in agreements and acknowledgements, in fines and years measured by calendars rather than seasons. Michael listens. He hears the story the state has assembled, a careful braid of documents and delivery logs, and the voices of people who finally chose to sleep at night. He does not flinch. He does not argue with the wind. He knows when to raise a hand and when to let gravity do its work. Attorneys move like conductors, shaping the mood with measured phrases. They speak of responsibility and of order restored. They lean on the idea that cooperation is a kind of repair. Michael sits with his hands still, the picture of a man who understands a ledger that must be balanced. The word restitution appears, heavy but not cruel. The word custody arrives, firm but not theatrical. The judge is respectful because respect is the scaffolding that keeps the room standing. There is a moment when silence feels like the exact center of the story. The judge reads a sequence that transforms a man from free to not free. The officers are gentle, the lawyers adjust their files with the precision of surgeons. In that stillness, Michael performs his own recalculation. A new schedule will begin. New limits. New forms of trust. He accepts it as he would accept a change in route for a driver on a foggy morning. No tantrum, only a nod to the reality of weather. In the visiting room of a facility built for routine, there are plastic chairs and tables that wobble only a little. Hours stretch like soft dough. People learn to talk without wasting words. On a first visit, family arrives with faces arranged to carry hope. They sit. They hold hands when they can, their fingers making a knot that will keep them from floating away. Michael thanks them for coming. He asks about meals and work and school projects. The conversations are ordinary on purpose. Ordinary is a lifeline. He learns the logic of the place. Lines matter. The order of names matters. The etiquette of asking matters more than in any boardroom he has ever seen. He keeps his head down and his spirit tidy. He reads because reading offers landscapes that do not require permission. He writes because writing lends shape to hours that would otherwise become fog. He does push-ups because a body that can move with strength remembers it is still a body. Time here is a different kind of currency. It is earned and spent with intention. Michael uses it to calculate a future that does not need secrecy to stand upright. He studies the mechanics of his own past with the care of an auditor. Where did the first compromise dress itself like kindness? When did efficiency turn into avoidance? He learns to remove bravado from the storyline, and what remains is a map with fewer shortcuts. Letters arrive with news of small triumphs. A niece wins a spelling bee. A friend opens a small deli and names a sandwich after an inside joke. A former driver sends word that his back finally healed and his daughter made varsity. Michael reads each note twice. He stores them like receipts of grace. He answers with steady encouragement and zero drama. He cannot send money, so he sends patience, the one gift that keeps its value in any season. There are also letters from strangers, people who heard a version of the story and want to know if the rumors grow or shrink when held close. He answers the ones that sound like they are asking for direction rather than entertainment. He warns against the romance of shortcuts. He warns against mistaking calm for safety when the calm is built on borrowed time. He keeps his words plain. Plain travels farther. Inside the walls, the clock collects weeks and months like stamps. The routine becomes a shore on which the mind can rest. In the dining hall, he sits with men who speak in careful jokes. He trades a portion of dessert for an extra fruit when it seems like the right call. He listens to the way stories curve, and he learns which versions are told to survive the afternoon and which are told to build a bridge to mornings that feel earned. Legal work continues beyond the scenes. A restitution schedule is set with numbers that would make a younger man flinch. Michael treats it like a mortgage in reverse, a duty that will take a long time and will define none corner of his days. He does not argue with its size. He measures progress in steady installments and vows not to miss any. A promise, once a street-level currency, becomes a ledger entry that wears a suit. When release finally gains a date on a calendar, hope arrives dressed as caution. He knows not to build castles in the mind. He makes lists instead. Call this person. Apologize to that one. Return a book that has been waiting for him at a cousin's home. Stand still for a minute in the open air and say thank you without trying to find the perfect words. He rehearses humility like a craft. The city outside has continued without him. It always does. He prepares himself for small shocks. The speed of the phones, the shift in slang, the station on the corner that used to fix flats now sells smoothies in flavors that sound like spring and neon in equal measure. He promises himself that he will not judge the changes. He will simply proceed with curiosity, the mood that rescued him from worse mistakes. After the gates open, the recalculation becomes flesh. He steps into a morning that smells like damp concrete and bus exhaust, and miraculous opportunity. He is determined to keep his world simple. The architecture of that choice is strict. Modest rooms, honest schedules, people who do not need introductions to stand with him. He starts to build a life in which sleep comes without bargaining. Old acquaintances test the perimeter, sometimes with warmth, sometimes with nostalgia that tries to recruit. Michael declines each invitation with thanks. He repeats that the past is not a currency he can spend anymore. He says no without applause, and he keeps walking. The city rewards forward motion. It always has. There are conversations with agencies that still carry ledgers with his name in them. He shows up on time. He keeps his tone level. He pays what is due when it is due. He is not trying to impress, he is trying to be precise. Precision leaves fewer stories for others to tell. At night he takes long walks. Brooklyn remains a textbook that updates with each edition. Corner stores have different owners but the same patience for regulars who count out change slowly. Schoolyards are still arenas where loyalty is rehearsed without anyone using the word. Sunday afternoons still smell like sauce, though some of it now comes from jars with labels that argue about authenticity. The music of the borough persists. He hums along without needing to lead. He thinks often about the math that once purred like a well-tuned engine. He does not glamorize it, he does not throw it in a fire either. He files it under lessons learned the long way. He admits the harm that does not fit into a headline. He admits the small good that arrived by accident. He refuses to let either admission cancel the other. This balance is the closest thing to wisdom he can claim. The final pages of this chapter take place in a quiet kitchen. He makes coffee at dawn. He reads and writes and plans a day that does not require a cover story. He answers a letter from a teenager who thinks the words "retired from the life" sound like a movie title. He tells the kid that life is better without titles. He tells him that real strength is the ability to choose the slower lane and stay there when the fast lane starts to sing. He signs with care and folds the page as if paper could carry grace in its creases. Chapter 8. A Different Kind of Stage. When a man leaves a life built on whispers, he must learn to speak out loud without inventing drama. Michael begins with small rooms, church basements that smell like coffee and lemon cleaner, school gyms where the banners are older than the students, community centres where folding chairs wait in neat rows like patient listeners. He tells a story that prefers the modest truth to the glamorous lie. He talks about routes and ledgers, and the way a shortcut steals from the future. The first time he steps to a microphone, his hands remember the old calm. He does not perform, he converses. He lets silence carry part of the message. He learns to pause when a sentence lands softly, and to move on when an anecdote threatens to become entertainment. The audience leans in. Some arrive expect a circus. Most leave with a blueprint for discipline. He adapts the voice of a coach rather than a confessor. He tells young men that patience is a tool, not a burden. He tells young women that certainty is not a gift given by others, it is a habit you give yourself. He describes how a city can pull you into its rhythms until you mistake habit for destiny. He shows them where he stepped off the path and how to read the signs that warn of cliffs disguised as parking lots. A different kind of work grows in the daylight, honest business that can be introduced without a knot in the stomach. Ventures that require genuine patience rather than camouflage. The same skills that once mapped daisy chains of paper now map supply chains that pay the taxes they owe and sleep without watching the door. He learns the wine trade, the speaking circuit, the writing of chapters that do not smudge when touched by curious hands. He is not trying to sell redemption. He is trying to model steadiness. There is light sarcasm in his delivery because sarcasm is a city vitamin. He jokes that the only thing scarier than a judge is a microphone with feedback. He jokes that spreadsheets are more dangerous than the street because they can fool you into thinking you understand everything. People laugh, and then they listen harder. Humor disarms the story and makes room for plain advice. He takes invitations that bring him to towns far from the boroughs. He sees how quiet highways stretch toward horizons that do not ask for tolls. He meets parents who want their sons and daughters to know that glamour often hides a handcuff. He meets kids who have never been to New York but understand the hunger for momentum. He shows them what momentum looks like when it is not tethered to a secret. The lesson he repeats is soft but firm. Do not admire the mask, admire the work. Work that endures does not need aliases. It does not need two ledgers. It does not require you to teach your own heart to whisper. He tells them about choice, that small hinge on which so many lives swing. Choose slow gains. Choose clean promises. Choose the lane that allows you to wave at yourself in the mirror without wincing. From time to time, a reporter asks questions that want a headline. He gives them something else. A paragraph that will never go viral because it does not shout. He says the story is only useful if it keeps a kid from taking a step he cannot unstep. He says the past is a book that will always be on the shelf, but you do not have to read it every night. He says the best part of a second chance is that it teaches you to stop gambling with the first chance of the next person. He keeps in touch with men who once stood beside him in rooms where the windows did not open. Some also chose new weather, some could not. He does not judge. He offers help where it will be accepted. He buys coffee. He answers late-night calls with respect for the hour and for the human at the other end. He knows the difference between rescue and respect. He chooses the second because it builds stronger bridges. Not every audience is kind. There are those who want him to glorify the old life, to turn the loop and the ledger into campfire tales. He does not. He holds the line. He reminds them that thrill is a short season and that winters are long. He reminds them that the state keeps records and that when your name lands in a ledger you do not control, it will arrive with a weight that strains the soul. He refuses the script that would pay better and sleep worse. The work takes him back to New York often. He walks past stations that now belong to different owners with different math. He sees prices climb and drop with oil markets that could not care less about his biography. He sees inspectors doing their jobs, younger and eager and armed with software that notices patterns he once coached into silence. He is oddly comforted by this. Systems should learn. That is how cities grow wise. There are stages with bright lights and better microphones, conference centres where badges swing from lanyards and coffee comes from silver urns. He stands there too, in a suit that fits because it was chosen, not because it hides. He tells executives and students the same truths he tells church basements. He does not switch dialects. He does not change the ending to flatter a room. Authenticity is his single luxury. At home he writes. Pages become chapters. Chapters become a record that cannot be mistaken for legend. He writes about his father with affection and caution. He writes about loyalty as a force that must be held with both hands and checked against daylight. He writes about the gasoline scheme with diagrams that would make any teacher smile for their clarity and then frown for what they enabled. He writes as if a future grandchild might day ask him to explain, and he wants to have the words ready. He continues to meet people who need a pivot, a boxer whose knees have given up on the dream, a clerk who has been cooking numbers for a boss who thinks law is a suggestion, a kid who has never felt famous but has always felt hurried. Michael teaches them how to slow down without feeling like they are falling behind. He teaches them to see the long game. He shows them how to replace the word hustle with the word craft. Humility becomes not only a posture, but a method. He laughs at himself in gentle ways. He admits when he is learning. He says thank you more often than he used to. Gratitude is a guardrail on a road that looks the same at every turn. It keeps you from drifting into old lanes. It keeps your hands where they belong, lightly on the wheel, eyes forward, mirrors checked. In quiet moments he tends to a small garden on a windowsill. Cherry tomatoes and basil, simple things that reward patience. He waters them with the same regularity he once demanded of schedules and counts. He admires how plants do not rush. They convert light and time into sweetness and scent. The lesson is as old as any borough and as new as any morning. He also gives time to faith, not as spectacle but as conversation with the part of the world that does not negotiate. He uses that time to make amends in chapters rather than headlines, calls returned, debts acknowledged, apologies placed gently not as currency but as truth. He finds that this work does not finish. He accepts that, and the acceptance itself becomes a form of rest. A final scene for this chapter takes place in a gym where the floor is polished and the air smells like rubber and hope. He speaks to students who sit cross-legged and restless. He tells them that grit is not the same as stubbornness, that courage is not loud, that peace is the only status worth chasing. He finishes with a simple promise. If you ever need to talk, reach out. Someone will answer. He steps away from the microphone, and for a moment the silence is the sound of futures recalculating. Chapter 9. What the Gas Taught the Streets. A city is a classroom that never rings a bell. Lessons sneak into daily life while people search for parking or stretch a paycheck to Friday. The gasoline scheme wrote its own syllabus across boroughs and bridges. It taught that systems are only as strong as their quiet corners. It taught that if a gap exists, someone will learn its shape and walk through it with careful shoes. First, there was the lesson in design. Taxis are built into the price so the driver never argues with a separate line, that elegance hides a burden that lives behind the station door. When the burden can be pushed along through paper hands, someone will push. It is not always greed. Sometimes it is the itch to prove a point about efficiency and control. But whatever the motive, the gap becomes a road unless someone patches it. Then came the lesson in human nature. People prefer routines that save face. A station owner keeps his pumps flowing and his shelves stocked. A driver keeps his route predictable so he can sit at the same diner at the same hour and get the good table without asking. An accountant loves columns that behave and numbers that do not make waves. These preferences can be coaxed into cooperation, for good or for a scheme. Michael understood that every profession has a comfort zone, and the zone can be tuned like a radio. Neighborhoods felt the weather in simple ways: a fresh coat of paint on a storefront, a new neon sign that actually worked, backpacks full of school supplies for a team that had always relied on hand-me-downs. None of this felt like crime to the people in line. It felt like progress. The problem with easy progress is that it rarely sends receipts to the places where promises are tallied for roads and schools. The cost becomes invisible until it is not. Agencies learn too. They learn that graphs should be read with the ears as much as the eyes. A soft dip can mean a loud truth. They learn to treat shell companies like a family tree that changed its last name every season. They learn that collaboration between offices beats turf wars, and that a clerk with patience can be more powerful than a headline. Quiet competence was the hero of this unit. The market reacted. Legitimate wholesalers grew sharper about their partners. They built checklists that looked like common sense and turned into shields. Insurance companies adjusted their question. Banks updated their alerts. 1,000 small things changed, and the sum of those small things made new space for trust. This is how a city heals when a scheme grows roots, not with one loud law, but with many small habits. For the families inside the loop, the lessons were more intimate. The kids learned that a parent who comes home on time is a kind of wealth. Spouses learned that serenity has its own flavor and it is better than fancy. Friends learn that a person can step away from momentum without falling. These are quiet truths. They sink in slowly and stay. Michael saw the long echo in faces. The former driver who no longer winced when a state trooper passed him on a bridge. The station owner who slept through the night because the only ledger on his counter now matched the on-file downtown. The accountant who still loved neat columns, but loved clean sleep more. There was relief in these stories, and that relief mattered more than any headline ever had. He also acknowledged the other side. Money that never reached the public ledger left small scars that do not bleed but do not vanish. A road took longer to repave, a school put off an order, a clinic replaced a machine a season late. These are the sorts of harms that do not show up in a movie. They live in errand lists and maintenance logs. He did not make excuses. He called them by their plain names and let the room sit with them until the weight registered. From Brooklyn to New Jersey to Long Island, the geography of fuel mapped onto the geography of trust. Bridges were not only steel, they were agreements. When a bridge is built well, people forget it exists. When a bridge cracks, everyone remembers it at once. The gasoline scheme built invisible bridges that could not bear honest weight forever. The repairs taught engineers and auditors and lawmakers how to build better ones. In boardrooms and classrooms, his talks turned into workshops on pressure and choice. He asked people to list the moments in their own work when a shortcut tempted them. He asked them to imagine the invoice that would be easiest to look past. He asked managers to describe their version of the weekly count and to decide how they would keep restraint at the center. He was not pointing fingers. He was handing out mirrors. Cops and investigators shared their lessons too. Patience over spectacle, patterns over noise, respect over swagger. The best interviews felt like conversations in a diner. The best breakthroughs came from questions that did not sound clever at first. The work was a craft, and craft loves humility. The neighborhoods kept their humor through it all because humor is how people carry weight without snapping. Old-timers called the tax pennies ghosts and said they had finally found a priest. Station cats continued to judge customers from the counter. Drivers still rated coffee by mile marker. Life went on, because cities are not fragile. They bend. They snap back. They learn. Michael also spoke about loyalty with more nuance than the old days allowed. Loyalty to people is noble until it asks you to ignore the math that keeps the whole town upright. Loyalty to a crew is steady until it becomes a leash that pulls you toward a cliff. The healthier form of loyalty is to principles that do not buckle when a charming plan smiles at you. He told young listeners that the strongest friend will applaud when you choose the boring, safe route. If a friend pushes you toward a glamorous mistake, that is not friendship. That is a costume. New rules and better software made the game harder for anyone hoping to reenact the loop. That was not the end of temptation. It never is. But the cost of trying rose, and the return fell, and in that new math many chose different paths. The story itself became a deterrent. The romance leaked out of the legend. What remained was a cautionary tale with tidy paperwork and lonely nights. On a quiet evening, Michael drove the same roads at a lawful pace and felt a different kind of satisfaction. The bridges hummed. The skyline flickered. Stations glowed like small hearths. He thought about how many hands it takes to keep a city gentle and how few it takes to tip it off balance. He chose gratitude. He chose to believe that most hands want to steady the table. He decided to help those hands wherever he could. The final lesson of the gasoline era was not about taxis or trucks or shell companies. It was about attention. The attention you pay to the small hinge that holds a door. The attention you pay to the pause before you say yes to something that sounds easy. The attention you pay to your own heartbeat when it speeds up for the wrong reasons. Attention is a kind of love. Applied carefully, it can keep a city from drifting. He ended many talks the same way. The street teachers, the classroom teachers, your quiet moments teach. Choose your teachers wisely. Then he would step away and let the room breathe, because the best lessons arrive when nobody is talking. Chapter 10. Last fill-up before dawn. The night before a fresh decision always feels like a train station at closing time. Few people, soft announcements, a clock that cannot be hurried. Michael stood in that kind of night and chose to take Canmore Drive through the routes that used to define him. Not as a victory lap, as a farewell tour to the version of himself who loved complexity for its own sake. He started near the water where the wind tastes like metal and salt. The station there had changed owners twice since the old days. The canopy light still buzzed with polite determination. A driver in a jacket that had seen many winters stretched his back and laughed with the clerk about nothing at all. This is what the city is made of, Michael thought. Work and small laughter and the promise that morning will show up on time if the pumps keep their word. He headed west where brick rows watched the street like families on stoops. He passed a diner that had once hosted plans and now hosted pancakes. Inside he could picture a kid doing homework in a booth while a parent counted out tips and smiled. He did not go in. Some rooms you honor by letting them remain ordinary. Across the bridge the river moved like a long thought. Tank farms stood in the distance, patient and immense. He remembered the physics of it all. Fuel that had to be measured and moved and accounted for with respect. Hoses that needed a careful hand. Racks that demanded discipline. The old thrill prickled at the edges and then faded, replaced by a gratitude that nothing in his life needed disguise anymore. The car turned toward Queens, where the streets have a rhythm you can tap with 2 fingers on the wheel. Stations here wore new signs and sold new snacks, and still smelled like gasoline and coffee because some things never change. He slowed to watch a mechanic slide out from under a sedan, with a face blackened by honest work and a smile that said the problem had been solved. He nodded to himself. Solutions that do not require stories are the best kind. He thought about names that would never return his calls, and names he still dialed when he wanted to check on a grandchild or a garden. He thought about his father, a presence both warm and stern, and how lineage can be a compass or a trap depending on how you hold it. He thought about the kids he had spoken to in gyms and auditoriums and how their faces held the light of futures he would never script. Light sarcasm visited him even in this quiet mood. He joked to himself that retirement meant fewer faxes and more Basil. He admitted he missed the weekly count only in the way a runner misses a hill that proved his lungs could work. The test is valuable. The hill does not need to be climbed again. Past midnight the city softened. Buses sighed at corners. A street sweeper wrote bright circles on asphalt. The radio played a song he almost recognized. He kept the volume low because the night deserved reverence. He let memory spool and rewind with no need for editing. The mistakes were part of the real, the kindnesses were too. He let them sit next to each other without forcing a tidy label. He pulled into a station for a final fill-up before dawn, more ritual than need. The attendant was young and cheerful and knew the price of everything on the shelves by heart. While the pump murmured, Michael watched the numbers climb and thought about the pennies that now found their way home without detours. The world does not become perfect, he told himself. It becomes a little more honest, one habit at a time. A man with work boots and a lunch pail bought coffee and nodded at him. They did not speak. The nod was enough. Two lives intersected for a breath in a pool of fluorescent light and then flowed back into their separate currents. That is the poetry of long cities. You share a moment and no one needs a story to justify it. When the tank clicked full, he replaced the nozzle and thanked the attendant as if a small ceremony had been completed. He paid, took a slow breath, and scanned the horizon where the first thin line of grey hinted at morning. He felt the relief of a choice confirmed by the simple act of returning the handle to its cradle. He had nothing to hide and nowhere to hurry. The ride home carried the texture of completion. He passed schools that would open in a few hours, bridges that would soon carry their usual orchestra of commuters, bakeries where ovens were already awake. He thought about the chapters still ahead. More talks, more letters, maybe a book club in a library with tall windows and a resident cat. Maybe a walk with an old friend who finally figured out how to let go of the fast lane. He would keep telling the story in a way that helped rather than dazzled. He would keep the tone calm and the conclusions plain. He would refuse the glamour that asks for the past to grow a cape and a theme song. He would offer instead a stack of practical choices, the kind any person could make on a hard Thursday with bills on the table and the phone blinking. The last turn brought him to a quiet block where the streetlights wore halos from a thin mist. He parked, sat for a moment with the engine off, and listened to the silence settle. There was no countdown, no curtain. There was only a man in a car, breathing evenly, grateful for a path that allowed him to sleep without bargaining. He stepped out, locked the door, and walked toward a door that did not need a story to open. In the kitchen he made coffee the way he liked it, no rush, no theatre. He wrote a short note to himself and left it by the sink. Keep the day simple, pay what is due, tell the truth kindly. The note was a compass, nothing fancy, just a point on the map to align with when the world started moving fast again. As dawn widened outside, he stood at the window and watched the first bus of the morning collect its passengers. He felt affection for the city that had been his stage and his teacher and his mirror. He did not ask it for forgiveness, he tried to meet it with respect. He raised his cup slightly, a small salute to bridges and ledgers, to second chances and steady work. Then he turned to the table, sat down, and began the day.